Rachel Martinez had been a registered nurse for 12 years, but nothing had prepared her for the nightmare that Mercy General Hospital had become under the leadership of Dr. Amanda Sterling. What started as a promising career move to a prestigious medical center had slowly transformed into a daily battle for patient dignity and basic human compassion. It began innocuously enough when Dr. Sterling was appointed chief medical officer 6 months earlier. She arrived with impressive credentials from a large metropolitan hospital system and promised to modernize operations and improve efficiency. The staff was initially optimistic about having dynamic leadership that understood the complexities of modern healthcare. Rachel first noticed something was wrong during her 3rd week under the new administration. Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, an 84-year-old woman recovering from hip surgery, had been pressing her call button for over an hour. When Rachel finally managed to check on her, she found the elderly woman had been lying in soiled bedding, too weak and embarrassed to call out for help. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Henderson," Rachel said, immediately beginning to clean and change the bedding. "This should never have happened. The other nurse told me I was only allowed to use the call button twice per shift," Mrs. Henderson whispered, tears in her eyes. "She said I was being demanding and that other patients needed attention too." Rachel's blood ran cold. There was no such policy, and even if there were, it would be medically dangerous and ethically wrong. She made a mental note to investigate further while focusing on comforting the distressed patient. "Mrs. Henderson, you can use that call button whenever you need help. That's what we're here for. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." After ensuring Mrs. Henderson was comfortable, Rachel sought out the nurse who had been assigned to that section. She found Janet Cooper, a relatively new hire who had started just before Dr. Sterling's arrival. "Janet, I need to ask you about Mrs. Henderson. She said you told her she could only use the call button twice per shift." Janet looked nervous, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "That's what Dr. Sterling told us during the staff meeting last week. She said we need to establish boundaries with patients to prevent them from becoming overly dependent on nursing staff." "Janet, that's not a real policy. We respond to call buttons because patients have legitimate needs. An elderly post-surgical patient should never be left lying in soiled bedding. But Dr. Sterling said we need to be more efficient. She tracks our response times and patient interactions. If we spend too much time with individual patients, we get written up for time management issues." Rachel felt a chill of recognition. This was exactly the kind of profit-driven thinking that turned hospitals into assembly lines rather than healing environments. She'd seen it before at other facilities, but never to this extent. "Janet, I need you to understand something. Our primary obligation is to our patients' well-being. If Dr. Sterling has a problem with proper patient care, then we need to address that through proper channels." Over the following weeks, Rachel began documenting instances of questionable policies and their impact on patient care. She discovered that Dr. Sterling had implemented a complex system of productivity metrics that essentially punished nurses for spending time with patients. Staff members were expected to complete tasks in predetermined timeframes, regardless of patient needs or complications. The situation escalated when Rachel was assigned to care for Michael Thompson, a 42-year-old construction worker who had been admitted with severe pneumonia. Michael's condition was complicated by his history of anxiety disorders, and he required frequent reassurance and careful monitoring. On her 2nd day caring for Michael, Rachel was approached by Dr. Sterling herself. The CMO was a tall, imposing woman in her 50s who carried herself with an air of unquestionable authority. "Nurse Martinez, I need to speak with you about your patient care metrics. You're spending an excessive amount of time with individual patients, which is affecting overall unit efficiency. Dr. Sterling, I'm providing appropriate care based on each patient's needs. Michael Thompson requires close monitoring due to his respiratory status and anxiety. Mr. Thompson's anxiety is not a medical emergency. We have protocols for dealing with psychiatric issues. Your job is to administer medications and monitor vital signs, not to provide therapy." Rachel felt her professional instincts clashing with the administrative pressure. Dr. Sterling, patient anxiety can significantly impact recovery times and medical outcomes. A few minutes of reassurance can prevent complications that would ultimately cost more time and resources. I'm not interested in your theories about patient psychology. I'm interested in measurable outcomes and efficient use of resources. You will limit your interactions with patients to essential medical tasks only. And if a patient's condition requires more attention, then you document it and move on. We have protocols for everything, and deviation from those protocols will result in disciplinary action. Dr. Sterling handed Rachel a thick folder of new policies and procedures. These are the updated guidelines for patient interaction. Study them carefully. Your performance will be evaluated based on strict adherence to these protocols. That night, Rachel went home and read through the entire folder. What she found horrified her. The policies essentially reduced patient care to a series of checkbox items, with no allowance for individual needs or circumstances. Nurses were expected to complete all tasks within rigid timeframes, regardless of patient condition or complications. More disturbing were the disciplinary measures outlined for policy violations. Staff members who exceeded allotted time with patients would face progressive discipline, including written warnings, suspension, and ultimately termination. The system was designed to prioritize efficiency over everything else, including patient well-being. Rachel realized she was facing a choice between her professional ethics and her job security. But as she thought about Mrs. Henderson lying in soiled bedding and Michael Thompson's frightened eyes, she knew there was really no choice at all. The next morning, Rachel arrived at work determined to find a way to provide proper patient care while navigating Dr. Sterling's oppressive policies. She had spent the night researching patient rights and nursing ethics, preparing for what she suspected would be an ongoing battle. Her first assignment was to care for Linda Peterson, a 38-year-old single mother who had been admitted for complications following a routine gallbladder surgery. Linda was scared, in pain, and worried about her 2 young children who were staying with a neighbor. "I'm so worried about my kids," Linda confided to Rachel during morning rounds. "They've never been away from me overnight, and I can't even call them because my phone died and I don't have a charger." Under the old system, Rachel would have simply found a phone charger or helped Linda make a call from the nurse's station. But Dr. Sterling's new policies specifically prohibited nurses from providing non-medical assistance to patients. Personal comfort items and communication needs were classified as family responsibilities. "Let me see what I can do," Rachel told Linda, knowing she was already pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior according to the new rules. Rachel found an unused phone charger in the break room and brought it to Linda's room. She helped the grateful mother connect with her children, watching as Linda's anxiety visibly decreased after hearing their voices. "Thank you so much," Linda said, tears of relief in her eyes. "I was so worried they thought I had abandoned them." "You're a good mom, Linda. They're lucky to have you." The interaction took less than 5 minutes, but Rachel knew it would be documented as a policy violation if Dr. Sterling found out. She made a decision to be more strategic about her approach to patient care. Over the following days, Rachel developed a system of providing compassionate care while technically adhering to the letter of Dr. Sterling's policies. She learned to document everything in ways that emphasized medical necessity rather than patient comfort. She found creative ways to provide emotional support while performing required medical tasks. But other nurses were struggling with the new system. Janet Cooper had been written up twice for spending too much time with patients, and she was becoming increasingly anxious about her job security. Veteran nurse Patricia Williams had been given a formal warning for allegedly violating protocols regarding patient interaction. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," Patricia confided to Rachel during a brief break. "Yesterday, I got in trouble for helping an elderly patient reach a cup of water. Apparently, that's not considered essential nursing care." "Patricia, you did the right thing. A dehydrated patient is a medical problem, not a convenience issue. Try telling that to Dr. Sterling. She's created this environment where we're afraid to be human beings. We're supposed to be robots who complete tasks and move on." Rachel was beginning to understand the full scope of Dr. Sterling's impact on the hospital culture. Good nurses were being punished for providing compassionate care, while those who followed the rigid protocols were rewarded regardless of patient outcomes. The breaking point came when Rachel was assigned to care for Robert Chen, a 73-year-old man who had been admitted with a severe stroke. Robert's speech was impaired, but his cognitive function was intact. He was frustrated by his inability to communicate effectively and was becoming increasingly agitated. According to Dr. Sterling's protocols, agitated patients were to be medicated and restrained if necessary. There was no provision for attempting to understand the source of their distress or addressing underlying needs. "Mr. Chen seems very upset," Rachel observed during the change of shift report. "He's been given medication for agitation," the previous nurse reported. Dr. Sterling ordered restraints if the medication doesn't work. Rachel spent time with Robert, trying to understand his needs through gestures and simple yes or no questions. She discovered that he was worried about his wife, who had been in the waiting room for hours without any updates about his condition. "Would you like me to bring your wife in to see you?" Rachel asked. Robert nodded emphatically, tears of relief in his eyes. Rachel knew that bringing family members into the ICU outside of designated visiting hours was against Dr. Sterling's policies. But she also knew that Robert's agitation was likely related to his concern for his wife, not his medical condition. She made the decision to briefly bring Mrs. Chen to her husband's bedside. The elderly woman's face lit up when she saw Robert, and his agitation immediately decreased as they held hands. "He's going to be okay," Rachel assured Mrs. Chen. "The stroke affected his speech, but his mind is still sharp. He's been worried about you." The reunion lasted only a few minutes, but it had a profound impact on both patients and family. Robert's vital signs stabilized, and his need for agitation medication decreased significantly. Unfortunately, Dr. Sterling chose that moment to make one of her surprise inspections. "Nurse Martinez, what is this family member doing in the ICU outside of visiting hours?" Rachel straightened her shoulders, knowing she was about to face consequences for doing what she believed was right. "Dr. Sterling, Mr. Chen was experiencing agitation that was likely related to separation anxiety from his wife. Allowing them to see each other briefly has stabilized his condition and reduced his need for medication. That's not your decision to make. We have visiting hours for a reason, and medical decisions are made by physicians, not nurses." "I understand, but the intervention was effective. Mr. Chen's vital signs have improved, and you will escort this family member out of the ICU immediately. And you will report to my office at the end of your shift for disciplinary action." As Rachel gently explained to Mrs. Chen that she needed to return to the waiting room, she saw the confusion and hurt in the elderly woman's eyes. Robert's agitation immediately returned, and his blood pressure spiked. "I'm sorry," Rachel whispered to them both. "I'll try to arrange for more visiting time tomorrow." But she knew that tomorrow might be too late. Dr. Sterling's war on compassion was escalating, and Rachel was about to become a casualty. The disciplinary meeting in Dr. Sterling's office was everything Rachel had expected and worse. The CMO sat behind her imposing desk, flanked by representatives from Human Resources and Risk Management, creating an atmosphere more suited to a criminal proceeding than a discussion of patient care. "Nurse Martinez, you are here because you deliberately violated established protocols regarding ICU visiting hours and patient-family interaction," Dr. Sterling began, her voice cold and clinical. "This is not your first violation of departmental policies." Rachel had prepared for this moment, bringing her own documentation of patient outcomes and nursing standards. "Dr. Sterling, I provided appropriate nursing care based on Mr. Chen's medical needs. His agitation was causing dangerous spikes in blood pressure and heart rate. The brief family visit resolved the issue without medication. That's not your determination to make. You are not a physician, and you are not authorized to make decisions about patient treatment or family access. I'm authorized to use my professional judgment to provide nursing care that promotes patient well-being. That's fundamental to nursing practice." Dr. Sterling's expression hardened. "Your professional judgment is secondary to hospital policy. We have protocols for a reason, and deviation from those protocols puts the hospital at risk. The HR representative, a thin man named David Brooks, consulted his notes. Ms. Martinez, this is your third documented violation of departmental policies in the past month. You've been counseled about time management, patient interaction boundaries, and now visiting hour violations. Rachel felt the trap closing around her. Those weren't violations of nursing standards. They were instances of providing appropriate patient care. They were violations of hospital policy, Dr. Sterling interrupted. And continued violations will result in termination. I'm placing you on a formal improvement plan, effective immediately. The improvement plan was a document designed to make Rachel's job impossible. It required her to complete all patient care tasks within rigid timeframes while maintaining detailed documentation of every interaction. Any deviation from the prescribed protocols would result in immediate disciplinary action. Dr. Sterling, this plan makes it impossible to provide individualized patient care. Nursing isn't an assembly line process. Nursing is whatever I say it is in this hospital. You will follow these protocols exactly, or you will find employment elsewhere. Rachel left the meeting feeling defeated but not broken. She understood now that Dr. Sterling's system was designed to eliminate nurses who prioritized patient care over administrative convenience. The good nurses would either conform or leave, leaving behind only those willing to treat patients as objects rather than human beings. That evening, Rachel began researching her options. She contacted the state nursing board to understand her professional obligations and legal protections. She reached out to patient advocacy organizations to learn about resources for reporting quality of care concerns. What she discovered was both encouraging and frustrating. While she had professional obligations to advocate for patient well-being, she also had limited protection from administrative retaliation. Healthcare workers who reported quality concerns often faced career consequences, even when they were ultimately vindicated. Rachel also began reaching out to other nurses who had been targeted by Dr. Sterling's policies. She found that several experienced nurses had already left the hospital, citing impossible working conditions and ethical conflicts. Those who remained were afraid to speak up, fearing for their jobs and professional reputations. But Rachel also discovered something else: she wasn't alone in her concerns. Several physicians had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Dr. Sterling's impact on patient care, but they were reluctant to challenge her authority directly. Some had begun documenting instances where administrative policies had interfered with appropriate medical care. Dr. James Rodriguez, a senior emergency physician, approached Rachel during a shift change. "I've been watching what's happening with nursing staff," he said quietly. "What Dr. Sterling is doing isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. Dr. Rodriguez, I've been placed on an improvement plan for providing appropriate patient care. I don't know how much longer I can maintain professional standards under these conditions. I've seen similar situations at other hospitals. The problem is that administrators like Dr. Sterling hide behind efficiency metrics and cost control, making it difficult to challenge their decisions. Is there anything that can be done?" Dr. Rodriguez looked around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "There might be. But it would require documentation of specific instances where these policies have negatively impacted patient outcomes. And it would require multiple staff members willing to speak up." Rachel felt a spark of hope. "What kind of documentation?" "Incidents where patients were harmed or potentially harmed by administrative policies. Cases where appropriate medical care was delayed or denied because of non-medical restrictions. I can think of several instances just from this week." "Can you prove they were caused by Dr. Sterling's policies rather than normal variations in care?" Rachel thought about Mrs. Henderson lying in soiled bedding, Michael Thompson's untreated anxiety, and Robert Chen's dangerous agitation. "I think I can. But I'll need help from other staff members. Be very careful. Dr. Sterling has allies in administration, and she's shown she's willing to destroy careers to protect her position." That night, Rachel made a decision that would change everything. She began creating a detailed log of every instance where Dr. Sterling's policies had interfered with appropriate patient care. She documented dates, times, patient conditions, and outcomes. She also began discreetly reaching out to other nurses and physicians who had witnessed similar incidents. The pattern that emerged was disturbing and clear. Dr. Sterling's efficiency-focused policies were systematically undermining patient care and staff morale. But documenting the problem was only the first step. Rachel knew that challenging a powerful administrator would require more than just evidence. It would require courage, strategy, and allies willing to risk their careers for the sake of their patients. As she prepared for what she knew would be a difficult battle, Rachel reminded herself why she had become a nurse in the first place. It wasn't for the money or the prestige, it was to help people during their most vulnerable moments. Dr. Sterling might have the power to make her job difficult, but she couldn't take away Rachel's commitment to her patients. The real fight was just beginning. Rachel's opportunity came sooner than expected, and in a way that made retreat impossible. During her next shift, she was assigned to care for Emma Rodriguez, a 6-year-old girl who had been admitted with severe dehydration following a bout of gastroenteritis. Emma's condition was stabilizing, but she was frightened and asking for her mother. Emma's mother, Maria Rodriguez, was a single parent who worked 2 jobs to support her family. She had been at Emma's bedside for 2 days straight, leaving only briefly to check on Emma's younger brother who was staying with a neighbor. "Mama has to go to work," Emma whispered to Rachel, tears streaming down her small face. "But I'm scared to be alone." Under normal circumstances, the nursing staff would have worked with the family to ensure Emma felt safe and supported during her mother's absence. Child life specialists would have been involved, and nurses would have provided extra attention to help ease the little girl's anxiety. But Dr. Sterling's policies had eliminated the child life specialist position as non-essential, and nurses were prohibited from providing excessive emotional support to patients. Emma was expected to cope with her fear using the same protocols applied to adult patients. Rachel's heart broke as she watched the frightened child cling to her mother. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what time do you need to leave for work?" "I have to be there in an hour, but I can't leave her like this. She's so scared, and she's never been in a hospital before. Let me see what I can do." Rachel approached the charge nurse, hoping to arrange for additional support for Emma. Instead, she was met with the familiar refrain about policy compliance and resource allocation. "Rachel, we can't make special accommodations for every patient. The child will adjust. That's what children do. She's 6 years old and scared. A little extra attention could prevent complications from anxiety and stress." Dr. Sterling has been very clear about maintaining professional boundaries with patients. "We provide medical care, not babysitting services." Rachel felt the familiar frustration of being trapped between professional ethics and administrative policies. She returned to Emma's room to find the little girl sobbing as her mother prepared to leave. "I don't want you to go, Mama. What if something bad happens?" Rachel made a decision that she knew would have consequences. "Emma, I'll be here with you while your mama is at work. I'll check on you extra often, and if you get scared, you can ask for me specifically. You promise?" "I promise." Maria Rodriguez looked at Rachel with grateful tears in her eyes. "Thank you so much. I know this isn't part of your job, but it means everything to us." After Maria left, Rachel spent extra time with Emma, helping her get comfortable and explaining what to expect during her stay. She arranged for Emma to have some coloring books and stuffed animals from the pediatric donation box. She also made sure to check on the little girl frequently throughout the shift. Emma's anxiety decreased significantly with the extra attention, and her medical condition continued to improve. Her appetite returned, she was able to rest comfortably, and her vital signs remained stable. Unfortunately, Dr. Sterling chose that afternoon to conduct one of her surprise inspections. She arrived to find Rachel sitting with Emma, helping her with a coloring book while monitoring her 4 fluids. "Nurse Martinez, what are you doing?" Rachel looked up, knowing she was about to face another confrontation. "I'm monitoring Emma's 4 and providing age-appropriate support to reduce her anxiety." "This doesn't look like medical monitoring. This looks like recreational activity." Anxiety can significantly impact a child's recovery. Providing reassurance and distraction are recognized nursing interventions for pediatric patients. Dr. Sterling's expression was cold and disapproving. You were specifically instructed to limit your patient interactions to essential medical tasks. This is clearly a violation of your improvement plan. Dr. Sterling, this is essential medical care. Emma's anxiety was causing her to refuse food and fluids, which could have complicated her recovery. That's not your assessment to make. If there are medical concerns, they should be addressed by the attending physician. Rachel felt her anger rising. Dr. Sterling, I'm a registered nurse with 12 years of experience. I'm qualified to assess and address anxiety in pediatric patients. You're qualified to follow orders and adhere to policies. Your consistent inability to do so suggests you're not suited for employment at this facility. Emma, who had been quietly coloring, looked up at the two adults with confusion and fear. She could sense the tension in the room, and her anxiety began to increase again. Is the mean lady going to make you go away? Emma asked Rachel in a small voice. Dr. Sterling's face flushed with anger. I am not mean. I am the person in charge of making sure this hospital runs properly. You're scaring the little girl, Rachel said firmly. Perhaps we should continue this conversation elsewhere. We'll continue this conversation in my office immediately. Another nurse can take over your duties. Dr. Sterling, I'm not leaving Emma until her mother returns. That's what I promised her. You'll leave now, or you'll be terminated immediately. Rachel looked at Emma's frightened face and made a decision that would change everything. Then I guess you'll have to terminate me. Because I'm not abandoning a scared 6-year-old girl to make your job easier. The confrontation escalated quickly. Dr. Sterling called security to escort Rachel from the hospital, claiming she was being insubordinate and creating a disturbance. Rachel refused to leave Emma's room, insisting that patient abandonment was a violation of nursing ethics. The scene that followed was witnessed by multiple staff members and several patients' families. Security officers were called to physically remove a nurse who was trying to comfort a frightened child. Emma was crying and asking for Rachel to stay. Other patients and families were asking what was happening. Dr. James Rodriguez, who had been consulted about another patient, witnessed the entire incident. This is completely inappropriate, he said loudly. Nurse Martinez is providing appropriate patient care. Dr. Rodriguez, this is none of your concern, Dr. Sterling replied. This nurse has consistently violated hospital policies and is being terminated. She's being terminated for comforting a scared child? That's exactly the kind of care we should be providing. The confrontation drew more attention as other staff members and family members gathered to see what was happening. Rachel found herself at the center of a public spectacle, but she also realized that she had inadvertently created exactly the kind of visibility that Dr. Sterling's policies couldn't survive. This is what your efficiency improvements look like, Rachel said, addressing not just Dr. Sterling but everyone who was listening. A scared 6-year-old girl losing the one person who promised to take care of her. As security escorted Rachel from the hospital, she knew her career at Mercy General was over. But she also knew that something important had been set in motion. The public confrontation had exposed Dr. Sterling's policies in the worst possible light, and there would be consequences that went far beyond Rachel's employment. The real battle was just beginning. The aftermath of Rachel's termination spread through the hospital like wildfire. Within hours, news of the incident had reached the local media, patient advocacy groups, and the state nursing board. The image of a nurse being escorted from the hospital for comforting a frightened child became a symbol of everything wrong with modern healthcare administration. Emma Rodriguez's story became the focal point of the controversy. Video footage from security cameras showed Rachel being removed from the hospital while the 6-year-old girl cried and asked for her to stay. The contrast between a caring nurse and administrative heartlessness could not have been starker. Dr. James Rodriguez was the first to take action. Within 24 hours of Rachel's termination, he had filed a formal complaint with the hospital's board of directors, documenting multiple instances where Dr. Sterling's policies had interfered with appropriate patient care. He also reached out to other physicians who had witnessed similar incidents. "We can't let this stand," Dr. Rodriguez told his colleagues during an emergency meeting. "If we allow administrators to fire nurses for providing compassionate care, we're complicit in the destruction of healthcare." Meanwhile, Rachel found herself at the center of a media storm. Local news stations picked up the story, and patient advocacy groups began calling for investigations into conditions at Mercy General. The state nursing board opened an inquiry into the circumstances of her termination. "I didn't set out to become a crusader," Rachel told a reporter. "I just wanted to take care of my patients the way I was trained to do. But when you see a scared little girl being treated like a number instead of a human being, you have to take a stand." The hospital's board of directors initially supported Dr. Sterling, releasing a statement about the importance of following established protocols and maintaining professional boundaries. But as more stories emerged about the impact of her policies on patient care, public pressure began to mount. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's mother, became an unexpected but powerful advocate for change. "That nurse was the only person who treated my daughter like she mattered," she said during a television interview. She kept her promise to Emma when everyone else was worried about rules and procedures. The story resonated with families throughout the community who had experienced similar treatment at Mercy General. Parents began coming forward with accounts of nurses who seemed afraid to provide basic comfort to their children. Elderly patients' families described visits where staff members appeared to be watching the clock rather than attending to their loved ones' needs. Patricia Williams, the veteran nurse who had been written up for helping a patient reach water, decided to speak publicly about her experiences. "I've been a nurse for 25 years, she said. "I've never worked in an environment where providing basic human kindness was considered a violation of policy." More healthcare workers began sharing their stories, creating a picture of a hospital where administrative efficiency had replaced patient care as the primary concern. The policies that Dr. Sterling had implemented were revealed to be part of a broader pattern of cost-cutting measures that treated patients as expenses rather than people. Dr. Sterling attempted to defend her position by emphasizing the importance of efficiency and resource management. "Healthcare costs are rising, and we need to find ways to provide care more efficiently," she said in a statement. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about resource allocation. But her defense rang hollow when contrasted with specific examples of the human cost of her policies. Emma Rodriguez's fear, Mrs. Henderson's humiliation, and Robert Chen's dangerous agitation were not abstract concepts, they were real people whose suffering had been deemed acceptable for the sake of administrative convenience. The investigation that followed revealed the full extent of Dr. Sterling's transformation of Mercy General. Patient satisfaction scores had plummeted. Staff turnover had increased dramatically. Medical errors had risen as overworked nurses struggled to meet impossible productivity targets. More damaging were the financial implications. The hospital was facing multiple lawsuits from patients and families who claimed their loved ones had received substandard care. Insurance companies were beginning to question the facility's quality ratings. The cost of Dr. Sterling's efficiency improvements was becoming apparent. Rachel, meanwhile, was fielding job offers from hospitals throughout the region. Healthcare facilities that had heard her story were eager to recruit a nurse who had been willing to sacrifice her career for patient care. But Rachel had a different plan in mind. "I don't want to just find another job," she told her lawyer. "I want to make sure this doesn't happen to other patients and healthcare workers." Rachel decided to file a wrongful termination lawsuit against Mercy General, arguing that she had been fired for fulfilling her professional obligations as a nurse. The case would test whether healthcare workers could be protected when they advocated for patient care against administrative policies. The lawsuit discovery process revealed internal documents that showed Dr. Sterling's policies had been implemented despite concerns raised by medical staff. Email exchanges between administrators showed that patient care concerns had been dismissed as resistance to change and professional jealousy. One email from Dr. Sterling to the hospital's CEO was particularly damaging. "We need to eliminate the nursing staff who think they know better than administration. These bleeding hearts are expensive and disruptive to our efficiency goals." The revelation that Dr. Sterling had specifically targeted compassionate nurses created a public relations disaster for the hospital. Board members who had initially supported her began to distance themselves from her policies. Emma Rodriguez's recovery became a symbol of resilience in the face of institutional failure. The little girl had successfully overcome her illness, but the trauma of watching her caring nurse being taken away had left lasting emotional scars. "She keeps asking when the nice nurse is coming back," Maria Rodriguez told reporters. "I don't know how to explain to a 6-year-old that adults sometimes care more about rules than about people." Public pressure reached a crescendo when the state health department announced a formal investigation into conditions at Mercy General. The investigation would examine whether the hospital's policies had compromised patient safety and whether regulatory standards had been violated. Dr. Sterling's position became untenable as more evidence emerged of the negative impact of her policies. Board members who had hired her began to question whether her approach to healthcare administration was compatible with the hospital's mission. The final blow came when a group of the hospital's most respected physicians submitted a letter to the board demanding Dr. Sterling's removal. The letter, signed by department heads and senior staff, argued that her policies had created a hostile work environment that was incompatible with quality patient care. "We can no longer provide appropriate medical care in an environment where administrative policies take precedence over patient well-being," the letter stated. Dr. Sterling's leadership has fundamentally altered the culture of this institution in ways that are harmful to patients and staff. The board's emergency meeting to address the crisis was standing room only, with community members, healthcare workers, and media representatives packed into the conference room. Rachel sat in the front row, flanked by Emma Rodriguez and her mother, symbolizing the human cost of administrative overreach. The confrontation was about to reach its climax. The emergency board meeting at Mercy General Hospital was unlike anything the institution had experienced in its 50-year history. The conference room was packed with stakeholders whose lives had been affected by Dr. Sterling's policies: patients, families, healthcare workers, and community leaders who had lost faith in the hospital's commitment to compassionate care. Board Chairman Robert McKenzie, a distinguished businessman who had served on the hospital board for over a decade, called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. The man who had been instrumental in hiring Dr. Sterling now faced the prospect of admitting that decision had been a catastrophic mistake. "We're here to address concerns that have been raised about patient care and administrative policies at Mercy General," McKenzie began. "The board takes these concerns seriously, and we're committed to ensuring that our hospital provides the highest quality care to our community." Dr. Sterling sat at the front of the room, flanked by legal counsel and looking defiant despite the overwhelming evidence against her policies. She had prepared a presentation defending her administrative changes and arguing that the criticism was based on misunderstanding and resistance to necessary modernization. "Board members," Dr. Sterling began, "the changes I've implemented at Mercy General were necessary to ensure the long-term viability of this institution. Healthcare costs are rising, government reimbursements are declining, and we need to operate more efficiently to survive." She presented charts showing reduced average length of stay, decreased staffing costs, and improved productivity metrics. To someone unfamiliar with healthcare, the numbers looked impressive. But the board members were beginning to understand that these improvements had come at a tremendous cost. Dr. James Rodriguez was the first to speak during the public comment period. "Dr. Sterling's metrics don't tell the whole story," he said. "Yes, we're moving patients through the system faster, but we're not providing better care. We're providing less care, and our patients are suffering for it." He presented his own documentation showing increased readmission rates, patient complaints, and medical errors. When you prevent nurses from spending time with patients, you don't just affect patient satisfaction, you affect patient safety. Patricia Williams, the veteran nurse who had been disciplined for helping a patient reach water, spoke next. "I've worked in healthcare for 25 years, and I've never seen anything like what's happening at Mercy General. We're being forced to choose between our professional ethics and our job security." She was followed by Maria Rodriguez, Emma's mother, who delivered the most powerful testimony of the evening. "My daughter was sick and scared, and she needed someone to care about her as a human being, not just as a medical case. Nurse Martinez was the only person who treated Emma with kindness and compassion. For that, she was fired." Maria's voice broke as she continued. Emma still has nightmares about the day the mean lady took away her nurse. She's 6 years old, and she's learned that sometimes adults care more about rules than about people. That's not the lesson we should be teaching our children. The emotional impact of Maria's testimony was evident throughout the room. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and even Dr. Sterling's legal counsel looked troubled by the human cost of the policies they were defending. Rachel spoke last, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. I became a nurse to help people during their most vulnerable moments. Dr. Sterling's policies made it impossible for me to fulfill that basic professional obligation. When I was forced to choose between my job and my professional ethics, I chose my ethics. I'd make the same choice again. Dr. Sterling responded by arguing that individual cases were being used to undermine necessary institutional changes. We can't make policy decisions based on isolated emotional incidents, she said. Healthcare is a business, and we need to operate according to business principles. But her argument fell flat when confronted with the mounting evidence of systemic problems. Board member Dr. Sarah Thompson, a retired physician who had initially supported Dr. Sterling's hiring, asked pointed questions about the increase in patient complaints and staff turnover. Dr. Sterling, how do you explain the fact that we've had more patient complaints in the past 6 months than in the previous 2 years combined? Patient complaints often increase during periods of organizational change. People resist new procedures and policies. What about the increase in medical errors? Are you saying that's also due to resistance to change? Dr. Sterling's composure began to crack. Medical errors are a complex issue. We're implementing new quality control measures to address those concerns. The quality control measures you've implemented seem to